So now that we've programmed the switcher and set all of our configurations, it'd be nice if the switcher were able to boot that way every single time. So what we're going to do is we're going to stay in the engineering setup menu. We're going to go to System on the left and Startup on the bottom. Now this menu tells the switcher how it's supposed to boot. When it comes from the factory, or in this case on my switcher, they're set to factory. If you look down here on Setup and Initial Status, they are set to factory. And what that means is every time the switcher boots, it's going to boot like it came from the factory. In other words, all the inputs are going to be set to N1, 2, 3, 4, etc., etc. All of our names will be gone. However, what we're going to do in this case is we're going to set these to be user. I'm going to select up on the top here, I'm going to select panel 1, I'm going to set my setup to user, and I'm going to set initial status to user. And I'm going to hit execute. And it's going to warn me that it's going to overwrite the flash memory, and that's okay. It takes just a second. I'm going to repeat this procedure for the switcher. And remember, the panel and the switcher are two separate pieces, so we have to do one for each one. I'm going to set setup to user, and I'm going to set initial status to user, and I'm going to hit execute. So now we've told the switcher to boot with the user data. Now we have to tell the switcher what that user data is. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit these buttons here called Setup Define and Init Status Define. Now, Setup Define is going to remember almost everything in the engineering setup menu. It's going to remember panel, switcher, and router tally. They do not remember the system because it's very unlikely you want to have the switcher keep booting in a different format every time. So those are kept in a separate memory. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit Setup Define on our switcher. Again, it's warning us that the flash memory is going to be overwritten. That's okay. Now, I have just stored everything in the switcher setup menu to flash. So I'm going to go back here and do the same thing to panel. Okay, so we've now stored the settings. Now, I'm also going to program a thing called Init Status Define. Now, Initial Status Define is a little different than Setup Define. Initial Status remembers the state of the panel when it's stored. So when I reset an ME or I clear a keyer, Initial Status says, how is it going to come back after it's cleared? So it's very important before you store Initial Status that you make the panel be exactly the way that you want it because it's going to remember it. So in my case, I'm just going to clear the entire thing to black. So the whole switcher's in black, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit Init Status Define on the panel, and again, it'll take a moment. And I'm going to hit Initial Status Define on the switcher.